I don't want to take care of a sick old woman, my daughter-in-law shouted. She kicked me out of the house after my arthritis diagnosis. She didn't know I was hiding a fortune of $28 million. The next day, I bought the entire condo complex and tripled her rent. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I stared at Dr. Ramos's lips moving, but the words seemed to bounce off my ears like raindrops on glass. Rheumatoid arthritis, advanced stage, progressive joint damage. The medical terms swirled around me as I sat in that sterile office chair, my hands already aching as if my body had been waiting for permission to hurt. Mrs. Collins, do you have family support at home? Dr. Ramos asked gently, her brown eyes filled with the kind of practiced compassion that comes from delivering bad news daily. Yes, I managed to whisper. I live with my son and daughter-in-law. What I didn't tell her was that I'd been living with them for 3 years now, ever since Walter passed. What I didn't mention was how Brittany's smile had grown thinner each month, or how Jason avoided eye contact when his wife made her little comments about personal space and independence. The drive home felt endless. My Honda Civic had seen better days, but it was paid for, just like everything else I owned. I'd learned long ago to live modestly, to save every penny. Walter and I had been careful with money our whole marriage. What my family didn't know was just how careful we'd been. I pulled into the driveway of the suburban house I'd helped Jason buy, though his name was the only one on the deed. Brittany's car wasn't there yet. She worked part-time at a boutique, though worked was generous considering how often she called in sick or left early for nail appointments. Jason was in the kitchen when I walked in, still wearing his pharmacy technician uniform. At 32, he looked older than his years. With Walter's thin brown hair and my pale blue eyes, he was stirring something that smelled like canned soup. Hey, Mom, how'd it go at the doctor? I set my purse down on the counter, my fingers already stiff from gripping the steering wheel. Not great, honey. We need to talk when Brittany gets home. Something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe, or annoyance. Is it serious? We'll discuss it together, I said, though my chest was already tightening with dread. Brittany arrived home at 6:30, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite supposedly working all day. She was 28, but carried herself like someone who'd never been told no. Her designer purse clinked with jewelry as she dropped it on the counter, right next to my modest handbag. God, what a day, she announced to no one in particular. Karen was being such a bitch about the schedule again. I swear, that woman lives to make my life difficult. Jason served dinner, his soup with store-bought bread. We ate in relative silence until I finally cleared my throat. I need to tell you both something about my doctor visit today. Brittany's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Jason looked up from his bowl. I've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, advanced stage. The doctor says it's going to progress, and I'm going to need help with daily activities soon. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. What kind of help? Jason asked quietly. Basic things, opening jars, carrying laundry, getting groceries. On bad days, I might need help with buttons or zippers. I tried to keep my voice steady. Dr. Ramos mentioned physical therapy, medication, maybe some home modifications. Home modifications? Brittany's voice cut through the air like a knife. What does that mean exactly? Grab bars in the shower, maybe a ramp for the front steps eventually. Nothing major right now, but absolutely not. Brittany dropped her spoon with a clatter. Jason, Brittany started, but she held up her hand. No, Jason, I'm sorry, but no. I didn't sign up for this. My heart began to race. Sign up for what? She turned him to face me fully, her green eyes cold as a winter morning. I didn't sign up to be a caregiver. I didn't sign up to have my home turn into a nursing home. I sure as hell didn't sign up to watch you deteriorate in my living space. Brittany, Jason said, his voice barely higher than a whisper, but she was just getting started. Her voice rose with each word. Do you know what my life is going to look like? Coming home every day to help you in and out of the shower, cutting up your food, watching you shuffle around with a walker? I'm 28 years old, Irene. 28. I have my own life to live. The words hit me like physical blows. I looked at Jason. waiting for him to defend me, to remind his wife that I was his mother, that I'd raised him alone after Walter died when he was 15. Instead, he stared at his soup. "I won't be a burden," I managed to whisper. "I can look into assisted living or—" "You're damn right you will," Brittany snapped, "because I am not going to spend the next however many years of my life taking care of someone else's problems." "She's not someone else," Jason finally spoke up, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's my mother." Brittany's laugh was harsh and bitter. "And she's been living here for 3 years already. 3 years, Jason. When does it end? When does our life actually begin?" I felt something die inside my chest. Not my heart. That was still beating, still pumping blood through my increasingly painful joints. Something deeper. Something that had believed, despite everything, that family meant something. "I see," I said quietly. "Do you?" Brittany leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the table. "Because I don't think you do. I think you see a nice little setup where your son takes care of you forever while I play nurse and maid and pretend to be happy about it." "That's not fair," I whispered. "Fair?" Brittany's voice reached a pitch that made me wince. "What's fair is me being able to live in my own house without worrying about whether you've fallen in the shower or can't open a pickle jar. What's fair is me not having to rearrange my entire life around your medical appointments and physical therapy sessions." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't want to take care of a sick old woman. There, I said it. I don't want to watch you get worse. I don't want to smell medicine and hear complaining and deal with whatever this is going to become." The room fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this boy I'd worked 2 jobs to put through school when his father died when he was 15. Jason. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe Brittany's right, Mom. Maybe it would be better if you had your own place, somewhere with people trained to help with this kind of thing." And there it was, the moment I realized I was truly alone. "I understand," I said, standing up on legs that suddenly felt ancient. "I'll start looking for somewhere to go." Brittany's expression softened slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to give in so easily. "It's not that we don't love you, Irene. It's just, this isn't fair to any of us." I nodded and walked toward my room, each step echoing in the silence behind me. As I reached the hallway, I heard Brittany's voice drop to a whisper. "Thank God! I was worried we'd have to fight about this for months. Now we can finally turn that room into the walk-in closet I've been wanting." The words followed me down the hallway like poison in my veins. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed Walter and I had shared for 37 years. The bed I'd moved here when I thought I was coming to live with family. Instead, I'd been living with strangers who shared my last name, and now they wanted me gone. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had options they couldn't imagine. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, listening to them discuss paint colors for their future closet, I decided to let them believe I was exactly what they thought I was, a helpless old woman with nowhere else to go. The apartment on Maple Street was a far cry from the suburban house I'd called home for 30 years. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to pass each other. The landlord, Mr. Huang, had looked at me with the kind of pity reserved for elderly women clutching worn purses and asking about the cheapest rent in town. $700 a month, he'd said gently. He'd included laundry in the basement. I'd nodded and handed him first month's rent in cash, watching his eyebrows raise slightly. Most people my age wrote checks or used cards, but I'd learned long ago that cash kept things simple, less traceable, less complicated. What Mr. Wong didn't know was that the $700 came from a checking account that held exactly $12,000, money I had carefully transferred to maintain the appearance of a woman living on Social Security and a small pension. My real accounts, the ones that held Walter's life insurance payout and 40 years of careful investments, remained untouched and invisible. Moving day came on a Tuesday. I'd hired 2 college kids with a truck for $50 cash. They loaded my modest furniture, the pieces Brittany had deemed acceptable to take, and my personal belongings into boxes that looked pathetic, stacked in the truck bed. Jason helped, though he avoided eye contact and spoke only when necessary. "You sure you have everything, Mom?" "I'm sure." I climbed into my Honda while he stood in the driveway, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Through the living room window, I could see Brittany watching from behind the curtains, probably counting the minutes until she could start measuring for her new closet. The first week in the apartment was the hardest. Not because of the arthritis, though my joints screamed every morning when I tried to get out of bed. The hardness came from the silence. No footsteps above my head, no television voices drifting from other rooms, just me and the occasional sound of Mrs. Navarro next door talking to her cats. On Friday, I discovered just how thoroughly Brittany had rewritten our family story. I was coming back from the grocery store, my cartwheels squeaking as I maneuvered up the sidewalk, when I ran into Lisa Porter. Lisa lived 3 houses down from Jason and Brittany, and we chatted politely at neighborhood gatherings when I still lived there. "Irene!" Lisa's voice carried across the parking lot. "I didn't expect to see you here." I paused, my hands gripping the cart handle. "Hello, Lisa." She hurried over, her face flushed with the kind of excitement that comes from having gossip to share. "I heard about what happened. Brittany told the whole neighborhood at book club last week." My stomach dropped. "What did she say?" Lisa's expression shifted to practiced sympathy. "About how difficult things became after your diagnosis. She said you were having episodes, getting confused, becoming aggressive when she tried to help. She said it broke her heart, but she had to think about her safety and Jason's." The words hit me like ice water. Episodes. "She said you threw a plate at her during dinner one night and that you kept forgetting to turn off the stove. She was worried you might burn the house down." Lisa leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "She said it was the hardest decision they ever made, but they just couldn't handle the violent outbursts anymore." I stood there in the grocery store parking lot, feeling the blood drain from my face. Violent outbursts, aggressive behavior, throwing plates. Every word was a lie, but Lisa's expression told me she believed every syllable. "I see," I managed. "She also mentioned that you refused to get proper help, said you wouldn't consider assisted living or home health care, that you insisted they take care of you personally." Lisa shook her head sadly. "It's so hard when elderly parents become demanding like that." Demanding? The word twisted in my chest like a knife. "Well," I said carefully, "I suppose everyone has their version of events." Lisa's smile was full of pity. "Oh, Irene, you don't have to pretend with me. Brittany said the medication sometimes makes you forget things or mix up what really happened. She said that's part of the disease." I nodded and pushed my cart toward my Honda, my hands shaking now for reasons that had nothing to do with arthritis. Behind me, I heard Lisa call out, "You take care of yourself, dear, and don't be too hard on Jason and Brittany. They did the best they could." That evening, I sat in my small living room with a cup of tea and my laptop. I wasn't sure what compelled me to check Brittany's social media accounts, but curiosity won over common sense. Her Instagram feed was a carefully curated collection of home improvement photos and inspirational quotes about difficult decisions and setting healthy boundaries. 3 days ago, she'd posted a photo of my old bedroom, now completely emptied and painted a soft pink. The caption read, "Finally getting to create the walk-in closet of my dreams. Sometimes life forces you to make hard choices, but you have to prioritize your own mental health and well-being. The comments were full of heart emojis and supportive messages from friends who had no idea what they were really celebrating. I scrolled further back and found a post from the week I'd moved out. It was a stock photo of an elderly woman's hands overlaid with text that read, "When loving someone means letting them go. Not all families are meant to live together, and that's okay. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is admit when a situation isn't working." The comments on that post made my chest tight. "You're so brave for sharing this." "It takes real strength to make decisions like that." "You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." Each comment was a small betrayal written by people who'd been told I was the problem, the difficult one, the burden that had to be removed. I closed the laptop and walked to my bedroom window. From there, I could see the lights of houses where families were probably having dinner together, watching television, sharing the small moments that make up a life. I wondered how many of those families had heard Brittany's version of events. How many neighborhood gatherings would I be quietly excluded from now? The next morning brought a knock at my door. I peered through the peephole and saw a young woman in scrubs holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Collins, I'm Emily from Helping Hands Home Care. Your daughter-in-law called and arranged for us to check on you." I didn't request any services. "Yes, ma'am. We understand that sometimes families arrange care when the client isn't initially receptive to the idea. Mrs. Collins, the younger Mrs. Collins, said you were having some difficulties accepting help and that the family was concerned about your safety living alone." More lies. More carefully constructed narratives that painted me as confused, stubborn, unable to make rational decisions about my own care. "I'm managing fine on my own," I said. "I'm sure you are," Emily replied in the tone healthcare workers use with difficult patience. "But maybe I could just come in for a few minutes just to chat and see how you're settling in." I let her in because refusing would only reinforce whatever story Brittany had told. Emily asked questions about my medications, my daily routine, whether I was eating properly. She was gentle and respectful, but I could see her making mental notes about my sparse apartment, my careful movements, the way I favored my left hand when reaching for things. After she left, I sat at my small kitchen table and realized the full scope of what Brittany had done. She hadn't just removed me from her home. She had systematically destroyed my reputation, my relationships, and my agency. To everyone who mattered, I was now the difficult elderly mother-in-law who'd become too much to handle. The woman who threw plates and forgot to turn off the stove and refused reasonable help. But as I sat there in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the modest possessions of a woman living on a fixed income, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. Because if they all believed I was just a confused old woman with limited resources and failing health, then they wouldn't be watching when I made my next moves. They wouldn't question the decisions of someone they'd already written off as mentally deteriorating. Brittany thought she'd won. She thought she had successfully disposed of a problem and convinced everyone it was the right thing to do. What she didn't realize was that she just made the biggest mistake. 2 weeks into my new life on Maple Street, I made my first real move. Not the kind of move Brittany would expect from a confused old woman living on Social Security, but the kind that required the resources I'd been hiding for 3 decades. I called Leonard Price at 9 a.m. sharp on a Thursday morning. Leonard had been Walter's financial advisor since 1987, and more importantly, he was one of the few people who knew exactly what my late husband had left behind. "Irene," his voice was warm but surprised. "I haven't heard from you in months. How are you settling in with your family?" "Actually, Leonard, there's been a change in my living situation. I need to schedule a meeting." "Of course. Is everything all right?" I looked around my sparse apartment, thinking of Brittany's Instagram photos and Lisa Porter's pitying smile. Everything's about to be. Leonard's office hadn't changed in the 15 years since Walter's death. Same mahogany desk, same leather chairs, same view of downtown's financial district. What had changed was the number on my portfolio statement. $28,400,000, Leonard said, sliding the papers across his desk. The tech stocks Walter bought in the 80s have performed exceptionally well. The real estate investments in Austin and Denver have tripled in value, and the life insurance money has been compounding steadily. I stared at the numbers, remembering Walter's voice from all those years ago. Irene, honey, we're going to live modestly and save everything we can. Let people think we're just getting by. The money will work for us while we're not looking. I need you to help me with something, Leonard. Something that needs to be handled very carefully. His eyebrows rose. What kind of help? I want to buy a property. Specifically, I want to buy the Willowbrook condominium complex on Cedar Avenue. Leonard leaned back in his chair. That's a significant investment. May I ask why that particular property? I told him everything. About the diagnosis, about Brittany's explosion, about being painted as a mentally declining burden who threw plates and forgot to turn off stoves. I told him about the lies spread through the neighborhood and the home healthcare workers sent to check on my competency. When I finished, Leonard was quiet for a long moment. And your son lives in this complex, Unit 4B? They pay $2,800 a month in rent. Leonard made a note on his pad. What exactly are you planning, Irene? I'm planning to teach my daughter-in-law about consequences. They said they couldn't help me. Let's see what they actually can't afford. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in discreet investigation. I hired a private investigator named Naomi Flores. Not for anything dramatic, just to confirm what I already suspected about Jason and Brittany's financial situation. Naomi's report arrived on a Tuesday. I read it over coffee in my small kitchen, my arthritis making the pages difficult to hold, but my mind sharp as ever. Jason earned $38,000 a year at the pharmacy. Brittany's boutique job brought in maybe $12,000 annually when she bothered to show up. They had $17,000 in credit card debt, mostly from Brittany's shopping habits. Their savings account held exactly $247. More interesting were Brittany's spending patterns. $500 at Nordstrom last month, $300 at Sephora, a weekend trip to Napa Valley that cost nearly $2,000, all charged to Jason's already maxed-out credit card. The woman who called me a burden and claimed she couldn't afford to modify her home for my disability was spending more on makeup in a month than I spent on groceries in 3. But the most revealing detail was buried in Naomi's financial analysis. Jason and Brittany had been late on their rent 4 times in the past year. Each time they'd managed to scrape together the money at the last minute, but the pattern was clear. They were living paycheck to paycheck, one emergency away from real trouble. That evening, I called the property management company for Willowbrook condominiums. The woman who answered sounded tired. Pinnacle Properties, this is Linda. Hello, Linda. I'm calling about the Willowbrook complex on Cedar Avenue. I understand the building might be for sale? Oh, yes, ma'am. The owners have been trying to sell for about 8 months now. Are you interested in purchasing a unit? Actually, I'm interested in purchasing the entire building. The pause on Linda's end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. The entire building? Yes, all 48 units. I'd like to schedule a viewing and discuss the asking price. May I ask who I'm speaking with? Irene Collins. I'll be working through my financial advisor, Leonard Price, at Price & Associates. 3 days later, Leonard and I walked through the Willowbrook complex with Linda and the current owner, a tired-looking man named Anthony Huang, who'd inherited the property from his father and clearly wanted out of the landlord business. Maintenance costs keep going up, Anthony explained as we toured the common areas. Tenants complain constantly. Half of them are behind on rent at any given time. I've been trying to sell for months, but most investors want newer properties. The building was solid but dated. Built in the 1980s, it had good bones but needed cosmetic updates. The units were spacious, the location was decent, and the rental income was steady, if not spectacular. "What are you asking?" I inquired, though Leonard had already done his research. $4.2 million for the whole complex. That includes all current leases and rental agreements. Leonard and I exchanged glances. The building was worth more than Anthony was asking, but his desperation was working in our favor. "I'll need to see all the current lease agreements," I said, "particularly any units where tenants have been problematic with payments." That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing every lease in the building. Most were standard one-year agreements with rent ranging from $2,500 to $3,000 depending on the unit size and location. Unit 4B, Jason and Brittany's apartment, had a lease that ran through the end of the year. Their rent was $2,800 per month, and according to Anthony's records, they'd been late 4 times, always managing to pay within the grace period to avoid eviction. I found something else interesting in their file. A noise complaint from the unit below them, filed just 2 months ago. Mrs. Delgado had complained about loud arguments, slamming doors, and what sounded like things being thrown against the walls. Things being thrown. I wondered if Brittany's version of events about my supposed plate-throwing incident was projection all along. The purchase moved quickly once I committed. Anthony was so eager to sell that he accepted my offer of $3.8 million paid in cash. The closing was scheduled for the following month, with ownership transferring on the 1st of December. During those weeks of waiting, I established my cover story. To anyone who asked, I was Irene Collins, a widow, living on Social Security, who'd moved to Maple Street after my family could no longer care for me. I shopped at discount groceries, clipped coupons, and drove my aging Honda to free community events. But every few days, I drove across town to meet with contractors and property managers, planning the improvements that would justify significant rent increases. New paint, updated fixtures, modernized appliances, all reasonable upgrades that would allow me to raise rents to market value. Market value for units like 4B was closer to $4,000 per month. I also spent time observing. Brittany's schedule was predictable. Work 3 days a week, yoga classes on Tuesday and Thursday, lunch dates with friends who seemed to mainly exist to admire her Instagram posts. She was always perfectly dressed, always carrying shopping bags, always projecting the image of someone whose biggest worry was choosing between the salmon and the chicken at brunch. Jason looked tired. I watched him from across parking lots and coffee shops, noting the way his shoulders slumped, the way he checked his phone anxiously, the way he seemed to age every time Brittany spoke to him sharply in public. 3 times I saw them argue in their car after emerging from stores where Brittany had clearly been shopping. Through my small binoculars, a purchase I justified as bird watching, I could see Jason gesturing at shopping bags while Brittany rolled her eyes and checked her makeup in the visor mirror. They were drowning in debt and pretending everything was fine. Meanwhile, Brittany continued to tell anyone who'd listen about how difficult I'd become before they were forced to ask me to leave. At book club, according to Lisa Porter, who seemed determined to keep me updated on neighborhood gossip, Brittany had shared that I'd been calling them at all hours confused and demanding. She had shown the other women photos of the beautiful closet she had created in my old room, explaining how freeing it felt to finally have space for herself after years of walking on eggshells around me. Each lie added fuel to the fire building in my chest. Not rage exactly, but something colder, something more calculated. On November 20th, Leonard called with the news I'd been waiting for. "Closing is confirmed for December 1st. The building will be yours, Irene." "What's your first move going to be?" I looked out my apartment window towards the direction of Willowbrook condominiums, where my son and his wife were probably having dinner, completely unaware that their lives were about to change dramatically. "I'm going to teach them the difference between can't and won't. They said they couldn't help me. Let's see what they actually can't afford." December 1st arrived cold and clear. The kind of morning where the air smelled like frost and everything seemed sharper than usual. I dressed carefully, not for ceremony, but for control. Gray wool slacks, a black turtleneck, the same modest coat Brittany had once mocked for being thrift store chic. I didn't care. I wasn't dressing to impress, I was dressing to become invisible. The ownership documents were finalized at 9:15 a.m. I signed the last page, shook Leonard's hand, and walked out of the office as the new legal owner of Willowbrook Condominiums. 48 units, 48 tenants, 48 stories, and one lesson waiting to be taught. By 10:30 a.m., my property manager, Valerie Brooks, began delivering official notices. Valerie had worked with Leonard's clients for over a decade, managing everything from luxury buildings to aging apartments with difficult tenants. She was calm, professional, and, as she put it, immune to emotional blackmail. I liked her instantly. We had drafted the notices carefully. Each tenant received a personalized letter informing them of the new ownership, scheduled maintenance inspections, and a rent reassessment effective February 1st. Most tenants would see an increase of $300 to $500, depending on the unit. Jason and Brittany's notice reflected a $1,200 increase. Unit 4B would now cost $4,000 per month, market rate for a fully renovated unit in their neighborhood. "This is aggressive," Leonard had warned. "It's legally sound," Valerie had countered. "If they can't pay, they'll have to leave. That's not your concern." That afternoon, I sat in my car across the street, pretending to read a paperback novel while Valerie rang doorbells and slid envelopes into mail slots. When she reached 4B, Brittany answered the door in a pink velour tracksuit, holding a smoothie. Her hair was curled, her makeup immaculate. Jason wasn't home. I watched as Valerie handed her the envelope and said a few words. Brittany smiled politely at first, but as she read the contents, her face darkened. Her mouth moved quickly, angrily. Valerie stood impassive, arms crossed, waiting. Brittany's hand flew up as if to wave the letter like a weapon. Valerie pointed toward the envelope calmly, then toward a line in the document, then turned and walked away. Brittany slammed the door so hard the decorative wreath shook. I laughed quietly to myself. For once, her door was the one being metaphorically slammed. Later that evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Jason. "Hi, Mom," or Irene, I guess. We just got a notice from the new property manager about a rent increase. We're not sure what's going on, but it's a huge jump, and we're really panicking over here. Can you call me back, please? I didn't. Over the next 2 weeks, Valerie received 5 emails from Brittany and Jason. The first was confused, the second indignant, the third borderline threatening, and the fourth a pleading for reconsideration. The fifth was a desperate appeal to avoid the increase entirely due to unique family circumstances. Valerie responded with a standard reply. All tenants are subject to the same market reassessment process. The owner's decision is final. On December 17th, I ran into Brittany at the grocery store. I was browsing the frozen vegetables when she rounded the corner at full speed and almost dropped her designer handbag at the sight of me. What are you doing here?" "Shopping," I replied, picking up a bag of peas. "This is where they keep the frozen things." She looked around, like maybe there were witnesses. "We got a rent notice from some woman named Valerie." "Yes, Valerie Brooks. She manages the property." "So you know her?" "Intimately." "Well, then maybe you can explain why our rent is going up by $1,200? "Market adjustment," I said, placing the peas in my cart. "You've been underpaying for years. We've never missed a payment." "You've been late 4 times." Her eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" I gave her a long, even look. I read the file. That's when her face changed. Not confusion, not even fear. Recognition. "You bought the building." "I did." "Why?" "Because I could." She stared at me, face reddening. "You're doing this to punish us." "No, Brittany. I'm doing this to correct a mistake. I gave too much power to people who hadn't earned it. I'm reclaiming it now. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Jason doesn't know what happened between us. He thinks you left to go live somewhere quieter. He doesn't know what you said, what you accused me of. You mean the night you told me I was a burden? That I threw plates? That I was losing my mind? I was upset. You can't seriously think raising our rent is some kind of justice. We don't have that kind of money. Then you'll need to find another place to live. Her mouth opened and closed, and for once, Brittany Whitman had nothing to say. I pushed my cart past her without another word. Christmas came and went. Jason texted once, "Can we please talk? I'm really confused." But I didn't respond. Valerie informed me that they hadn't paid January rent, likely hoping I'd reverse the increase or formet. I didn't. On January 7th, they were served with a formal notice to pay or vacate within 30 days. The eviction process had begun. Valerie handled it all. I watched from the sidelines, quiet and cold and resolute. It felt strange in those early days of January to feel something like peace. Not joy. There was nothing joyful about dismantling your own child's illusion of superiority, but clarity. Every step I took reminded me that I had not lost myself. My body ached, yes, my joints flared, but my mind, my will, was intact, stronger than ever. On January 28th, I saw a U-Haul parked outside Willowbrook. I sat in my car as Jason and Brittany loaded their belongings with stiff, angry movements. There was no ceremony, no farewell, just cardboard boxes and grim expressions. Jason looked thinner. Brittany still wore expensive sunglasses, but her hair was tied back, her makeup immaculate. They didn't speak to each other. I never learned where they went. Valerie later confirmed they'd left the apartment with minor damages and a scathing note on the kitchen counter that ended with, "We hope you rot alone." I smiled when I read it. I already had. And I'd survived. But my story wasn't over. Not yet. Owning Willowbrook gave me something else. Access. Resources. Power. And it gave me the chance to do something I hadn't thought possible after that night on the porch when Jason slammed the door. Build a future on my own terms. A week after the eviction, I visited apartment 1A where Mrs. Delgado had filed those noise complaints. I knocked, introduced myself, and asked if she'd like new flooring and an updated bathroom. "On me," I said. "Consider it a thank you." She smiled so wide her dentures clicked. In Unit 3C, I helped a single mom named Naomi Flores, yes, the same private investigator, get an extension on her rent while she finished nursing school. In Unit 5B, I installed a ramp for a Vietnam veteran who'd been dragging himself up the stairs for years. With Jason and Brittany gone, there was space for something better, something honest. And then in March, I received a letter. It was handwritten, shaky, but familiar. "Dear Mom, I don't know where to begin. I don't know if you'll even read this, but I'm sorry. I didn't know everything. I didn't want to know everything. I let Brittany control the narrative because it was easier than facing the truth. You didn't deserve what happened. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I see it now. I see you. Love, Jason." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some things didn't require an answer, just acknowledgement. By the time April rolled around, Willowbrook felt different. Not just structurally, though we'd repainted the stairwells and replaced a crumbling retaining wall, but emotionally. Tenants greeted each other in the halls. Someone planted tulips near the front steps. A group of kids drew chalk art on the sidewalks every Saturday morning. It was still a low-income building. People still struggled. But there was dignity now, and purpose. I began spending more time in the building's management office, a small room on the ground floor that had once stored folding chairs and cleaning supplies. Valerie helped me convert it into a workspace. desk, filing cabinets, a bulletin board with job postings, community news, and a flyer I designed myself. Let's rebuild together. Irene Flores, owner and advocate. I wasn't just managing a property, I was stewarding a place that deserved care. One afternoon, Naomi Flores dropped by to return a set of spare keys I'd lent her. "You're here more than the last 2 landlords combined," she said, smiling. "It's nice to see someone who actually gives a damn." "I lived here once," I told her, "a long time ago, before I married Walter." "Was it better then?" "It was different. I was different." Naomi had hesitated, then reached into her backpack. "I have something for you. It's weird, maybe, but I think you should have it." She handed me a sealed manila envelope. Inside was a thin report, 10 pages, printed, neatly stapled. "Background check," she said, "on Brittany. I ran it months ago, after you called me crying. I never followed up because you disappeared and I didn't want to cross a line, but it's yours now." I flipped through it. Credit history, employment inconsistencies, past addresses. There were gaps. Brittany had reinvented herself several times, especially after moving to our city. She'd changed her legal name at least once and listed a degree she never actually completed. Naomi leaned against the wall. "There's nothing criminal, nothing that'll get her arrested, but it paints a picture, doesn't it?" "Yes," I said. "It does." I tucked the report into my desk drawer and closed it gently. I didn't need to weaponize Brittany's past. I already knew what mattered. Her present was unraveling. A few weeks later, Valerie informed me that a new tenant was applying for 4B. It's a young woman, graphic designer, good credit, remote job. She asked if we'd let her put up wallpaper. I smiled. Tell her yes. Tell her to make it hers. On a rainy Tuesday in May, I ran into Walter at the pharmacy. He was picking up a prescription, reading glasses pushed halfway down his nose. "Irene," he said, blinking. "It's been a while." 7 months, not that anyone's counting. He looked thinner, grayer. There were deep lines at the corners of his mouth. He said, "I heard about the building. Jason told me." "Did he tell you why?" He exhaled slowly. "He said things got complicated, that you were angry and retaliating. Do you believe that?" "I don't know what to believe anymore. Try believing me, for once." He adjusted his jacket. "Do you want to get a coffee?" "No," I said, clearly. "I want you to think about what it means that you waited until you ran into me to say anything." His face reddened. "I didn't know how to fix it." "You didn't try." I turned and walked away, leaving him in the antiseptic glow of the pharmacy aisle. It wasn't closure, exactly, but it was movement. That evening, I sat by my window and reread Jason's letter. It had arrived months ago, a fragile attempt at reconciliation, but I wasn't ready then. I wasn't sure if I was ready now either. I called Emily, my old caregiver. She'd taken a job with another family after I moved out, but always sent Christmas cards. "Irene," she said when she picked up, "it's been forever. How are you?" "Better. Stronger." "You sound like it. What's going on?" I told her everything. The building, the eviction, the letter, the tulips on the steps, and the kids with chalk. When I finished, she was quiet. "You built a whole life," she said. "They tried to shrink you down and you expanded instead. That's beautiful." "It still hurts," I admitted. "I still miss the version of my son I thought I had." "That version didn't exist," she said gently. "But you do, and you're still here." In June, I hosted a summer block party in the Willowbrook parking lot. Valerie helped secure permits. Naomi brought speakers. Mrs. Navarro, the elderly tenant in 2D, made tamales that sold out in 10 minutes. There were balloons, laughter, paper plates everywhere. I wore a straw hat and manned the lemonade table. For the first time in years, I wasn't watching my back or shrinking into the edges of a room. I was visible, present, alive. That night, as we cleaned up, Naomi pulled me aside. "You know, you're kind of a legend around here now." I doubt it. Seriously, people talk. You turned this place around. You made it safe again. I just removed what was rotten. Sometimes, she said, that's enough. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in ages. Peace. Real, unmanufactured peace. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave the pain a place to rest. In June, I attended a city council meeting where they discussed zoning changes for nearby properties. I spoke during public comment advocating for low-income protections. Safe housing isn't a favor, it's a right, and we can do better. Afterwards, a woman approached me in the parking lot. Irene Flores, she asked. You used to be Opal Whitman, right? I did, I said. Do we know each other? I lived in 3A back in the 80s. You were kind to me once. I never forgot. We talked for an hour about the past, about change, about how even after decades, kindness leaves a trace. I thought about that as I drove home, about how much I had lost and how much I'd reclaimed. Jason hadn't written again. Walter hadn't called. Brittany was a ghost. And yet, I was fuller than I'd ever been. Because my life was mine again. Because I stopped asking to be seen and started seeing myself. As summer deepened, Willowbrook flourished. We installed a community garden. I taught a Saturday budgeting class. I mentored 2 high school seniors applying for college. I was tired, yes, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that came from purpose, not survival. One day in late August, a letter arrived. It was from a lawyer. The return address was unfamiliar. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a brief note. Mrs. Flores, I represent a client interested in acquiring several properties in your neighborhood. They are particularly interested in Willowbrook condominiums and would be willing to offer a significant premium. Please contact me if you are open to negotiation. I laughed out loud. I'd bought the building for justice. I'd kept it for healing. I wasn't about to sell it for profit. I tossed the letter in the trash and went to water the tulips. Some things, I'd learned, were worth holding on to, others worth letting go. September brought a kind of stillness. The air changed. Willowbrook's leaves turned gold, then amber. On a quiet Thursday, I walked the hallway of the 3rd floor and heard laughter from 3C. Children's voices, a mother humming. Life pulsed through the walls now, not fear. I was repairing more than a building. I was restoring a legacy. One morning, I passed by the front mailboxes and noticed an envelope taped to the corkboard, addressed to the woman who saved us. I opened it slowly, unsure what I'd find. Inside was a handmade card, construction paper folded into a lopsided heart. Crayon handwriting. Thank you for not letting the bad people win. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. No name, no signature, just truth. The next week, Alyssa and Noah Park moved in. Newlyweds, polite, nervous. I gave them a tour myself, pointing out the laundry room, the community bulletin, and the stairwell that still needed repainting. It's not perfect, I said, but it's home, and if you have ideas, I want to hear them. They exchanged glances. Actually, Noah said, we were hoping to start a book club. We've got shelves of novels and no one to talk about them with. You just made my day, I said. They posted a flyer that afternoon. By October, we had 12 members. Valerie hosted meetings in the laundry room, which we converted into a cozy nook every Thursday evening. Folding chairs, string lights, hot cocoa. We started with the house on Mango Street, then the color purple, then the Joy Look Club, stories that echoed, stories that mattered. At the second meeting, a tenant named Maria shared that she hadn't read a book in 20 years. But this one, she said, clutching a paperback to her chest, reminded me who I used to be. I watched her speak and felt something deep inside me click into place. We were more than residents. We were witnesses to each other. That month, I finally cashed the last of my inheritance checks. I'd been saving them, out of habit, fear, or maybe defiance. But now I saw them differently, not as lifelines, as tools. I bought 3 new washing machines, replaced 2 old water heaters, donated $1,000 to the local women's shelter. It felt like letting go and holding on all at once. On Halloween, I dressed as a sunflower and handed out candy at the front desk. Children paraded in and out, dinosaurs, witches, one very confident SpongeBob. At one point, little Mateo from 2A tugged my sleeve and whispered, "You're the nicest old lady ever." I laughed until my cheeks hurt. The next morning, I found a pumpkin on my doorstep, carved with the word love. November was harder. The anniversary of my diagnosis loomed. I moved slower. My joints ached. But I refused to retreat. Emily visited and brought homemade soup, massaged my hands with lavender oil. "You're doing too much," she said. "You need to rest sometimes." "If I stop, I might never start again," I told her. "That's not true," she said. "You started after losing everything. That's the hardest thing to do." Her words stayed with me. When the pain flared, I let myself nap. When sadness crept in, I walked the halls and listened for life. There was always life. On Thanksgiving, we held a potluck in the courtyard. Tables lined with dishes, tamales, stuffing, mac and cheese, apple pie. Everyone brought something. Even the people who had nothing found a way to give. Jason did not call. Walter did not write. Brittany had vanished. But I was not alone. At the end of the night, as we cleaned up foil trays and crumpled napkins, Mrs. Navarro hugged me tightly. "You gave us back our home," she said. "No one else ever did that." December brought snow. Not much, just a dusting, but it was enough for the kids to build a lopsided snowman. I gave them my old scarf to wrap around its neck. They named him Mr. Chuckles. On Christmas Eve, we organized a secret Santa exchange. Naomi dressed as Mrs. Claus, Valerie made spiced cider, and I handed out wrapped books to each child, tagged with their names. Stories wrapped in ribbon. Hope disguised as fiction. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with a cup of tea and watched the snow fall. No tree, no stockings, just quiet, just peace. And for once, it was enough. On New Year's Day, I stood at the edge of the community garden and whispered a promise to the wind. This year, I will keep blooming, no matter the frost. In January, I slipped on an icy step and bruised my hip. Nothing serious, but enough to scare me. Emily insisted I use a cane for a few weeks. "Dignity is not refusing help. It's knowing when you need it," she said. I took her words to heart. Started accepting offers from neighbors to carry groceries, to shovel snow, to fix flickering lights. It felt strange at first, then warm, then necessary. One cold morning, as I sat by the window journaling, Naomi knocked on my door. "I have news," she said, cheeks flushed. "There's a grant, a real one, from the city for community revitalization, and you qualify." "I'm not a nonprofit." "Doesn't matter. You're doing the work, and they've noticed." We spent the next week filling out paperwork, budget breakdowns, impact statements, photos of the garden, the book club, the chalk art. In March, we got the call. Approved. $25,000. I cried in the hallway, was surrounded by neighbors who had become family. With the grant, we expanded the garden, added benches, a tool shed, a mural wall. We hired a part-time counselor to offer free therapy sessions. We started a teen mentorship program. Every day, Willowbrook became more alive, more whole. In April, I received a letter with unfamiliar handwriting, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. "You were right about everything." No signature, no clue, but I knew, and it was enough. Spring arrived with daffodils and birdsong. I walked the perimeter of the building one morning and saw that someone had painted a message on the retaining wall. "She gave us roots." I stood there for a long time, hand pressed to the concrete. Not crying, just breathing, just being. I had become the woman I once needed, the mother I once hoped to be. And even if Jason never called again, even if Walter stayed gone, even if Brittany erased me from every corner of her memory, I had rebuilt. From ashes, from grief, from silence. And I was not done yet. May was the month the roof finally got replaced. I stood in the parking lot watching the crew peel back 30 years of rot and patchwork. The building seemed to breathe easier. So did I. The new shingles were dark gray, clean, confident, like armor. That same week, we started a kids' mural on the east wall of the courtyard. Naomi led the project, and the children filled it with sunflowers, butterflies, bright blue skies, and tiny figures holding hands. One afternoon, as I was admiring their work, little Grace from 2B pointed to a figure in a wide-brimmed hat with a cane and said, "That's you, Miss Irene. You keep us safe." I smiled and said, "I try my best." She shook her head. "You always do." Summer arrived with a burst of color. Hanging flower baskets on balconies, lemonade stands on the sidewalk. I organized a sidewalk chalk festival in July. Every square foot of pavement turned into rainbows, animals, stars, and names written in block letters. At sunset, we had a popsicle party. Parents sat on the grass, kids chased each other barefoot, and I felt the rarest kind of joy. Simple, sustained, and shared. In early August, a man showed up at the front office asking for me by name. He was tall, thin, with graying hair and a tired smile. "Are you Irene?" "Yes," I said slowly. "I'm Leonard Price. I knew your husband. A long time ago." I led him to the office and poured 2 glasses of water. He sat across from me, hands folded. "Walter and I were business partners in the 80s, he said. "I read about you in the local paper. The revitalization grant. I recognized the name, and I wanted to apologize." I tilted my head. "For what?" "For not speaking up. For not helping you when everything went bad. I knew things, I should have said something, but I stayed out of it, because it was easier, and I've regretted it for years." I studied him. He seemed sincere. "Why now?" "Because you turned something ugly into something beautiful, and because my wife passed away last year, and I've been asking myself what kind of man I really was." We talked for over an hour. About Walter, about choices, about silence. As he left, he handed me a check. "It's not a bribe or a guilt offering, it's a contribution to whatever comes next." I unfolded it. $5,000. I looked up, stunned. "Use it however you see fit," he said. "It's yours." That night, I added it to the community fund. We bought new desks for the study room, paid for a field trip to the zoo, sponsored art supplies for the mural kids. The impact was immediate. Real. In September, I noticed a new tenant sitting alone by the garden. An elderly woman with silver braids and a cane, not unlike mine. I introduced myself. Her name was Mrs. Navarro, a retired teacher. She had moved in after losing her home to a fire. "Starting over is hard," she said. "But this place feels gentle." I nodded. "Gentle is good." She joined our Thursday book club. By the 3rd meeting, she was leading the discussion. "Words," she said one night, "can be bridges or weapons. We get to choose." One rainy morning in October, I woke to find an envelope slid under my door. Inside was a photo, a grainy snapshot of me, taken during the chalk festival. I was laughing, surrounded by children. On the back, someone had written, "This is what strength looks like." I pressed the photo to my chest. I didn't need to know who took it. It was the truth. Halloween came and went. Mr. Chuckles got a new scarf. The kids paraded in costumes, pirates, dragons, a mini Frida Kahlo. I handed out candy dressed as a bumblebee. That night, as I was locking the front office, I noticed a car idling at the curb. The window rolled down. Jason. He looked older, tired. "Hey, Mom," he said. I stood frozen. "What are you doing here?" "Can we talk?" We sat in the office, 2 cups of tea between us. He stared at the floor. I messed up. I know that. Brittany left, said I was emotionally unavailable, said I never stood up for her. For us. She was right, I said quietly. He nodded. You were right too, about a lot of things. I just didn't want to hear it. And now? Now I'm trying to fix things, starting with you. I didn't answer right away. I looked at his face. The boy I raised, the man he became. You hurt me. In ways I didn't think possible. I know. And I won't ask you to forgive me today. I'd like to be part of your life again. If you'll let me. I stared at my tea. You can start by volunteering at the next book club. We need someone to carry chairs. He blinked, then laughed. Okay, I can do that. And Jason? Yeah? No more lies. No more lies. He showed up that Thursday. He carried every chair, listened to every woman speak, and when it was over, he stayed to wash the mugs. No grand apology, no speeches, just presence. And that was a start. November returned this time. Quieter. I walked slower, slept longer, but the fire inside me remained. One night, as snow flurried past the windows, I sat down to write. Not in my journal this time. A letter. To the city, to the papers, to anyone who would listen. I told the story of Willowbrook, not as tragedy, but as testimony. I wrote about the mothers and memorials, the gardens and the grief. I wrote about what happens when you listen to the quiet women, when you trust them, when you follow their lead. I didn't know what would come of it, but writing it was enough. By December, the letter had been shared online, hundreds of times, then thousands. Emails poured in from other cities, other buildings, other women. How did you do it? How did you survive? I replied to everyone, not with instructions, but with encouragement. I wrote, start with one light bulb, one conversation, one child's drawing on the wall. The rest will follow. On Christmas Eve, Jason brought over a tree. Small, crooked, decorated with handmade ornaments. He cooked dinner, lasagna, garlic bread, a store-bought pie. Not bad for a reformed villain, he joked. We're not doing labels tonight, I said. Just family. He stayed until midnight. Before leaving, he hugged me. Thank you, he whispered. I didn't answer. Just squeezed back. That night, as I turned off the lights and looked around my apartment, I felt something settle inside me. Not closure, not revenge, something better. Return. And in that stillness, I finally slept without dreaming of fire. January brought a fresh layer of snow and a new grant proposal. Valerie and I spent long hours crafting it, detailing our progress, our plans, and our philosophy. We don't want to expand, I wrote. We want to deepen. We believe change starts with trust, and trust begins with listening. The response came within 3 weeks. Approved. Fully funded. Enough to cover renovations for the West Wing, add a second community garden, and hire a full-time youth mentor. I read the email aloud to the Thursday book club. Cheers erupted. Mrs. Navarro cried. Even Jason, now a regular at meetings, clapped so hard he knocked over a mug. I felt something lift in my chest, a quiet pride, hard-earned and well-placed. The next day, Brittany showed up. I opened the front door to find her standing there in a gray coat, holding a folder. I heard about the grant, she said. Impressive. Thank you, I replied. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat in the office. She placed the folder between us. Divorce papers, she said. It's official. No assets to split, since he signed everything over to you, including the condo. I didn't respond. She stared at her hands. I'm messed up. I got greedy and scared. When I found out about your diagnosis, I panicked. I thought, if you got worse, if Jason had to take care of you, I'd lose everything. So you tried to speed it up. I told myself you wouldn't care, that you didn't need a condo or a legacy. I told myself you were in the way. And now? Now I see what you built, and I want to be part of it. I raised an eyebrow. You want a job? I want a purpose. I considered her. She looked thinner, sadder, but not broken. You can start by repainting the laundry room. Then we'll talk. She blinked. Really? Trust has to start somewhere. She showed up the next day with 2 gallons of paint and a roller. By week's end, the laundry room had new walls, folded flyers about energy conservation, and a free bookshelf labeled Take One, Leave One. In February, I started a writing workshop called Our Stories. Each week, tenants gathered in the study room to share a memory, a first love, a last goodbye, a favorite meal. Mrs. Delgado wrote about her quinceañera. Naomi shared a poem about the day her daughter said, "I love you" in sign language. Jason surprised us all with a story about the time he built a treehouse that collapsed in under 5 minutes. We laughed until we cried. By March, Brittany had organized a coat drive. Jason was tutoring kids in math, and Mrs. Navarro had launched a garden club with a sign-up sheet and seed packets. I stood in the courtyard one morning, listening to the birds, the footsteps, the laughter echoing from open windows, and thought, this is not a recovery. This is a renaissance. One evening, as I returned home from a city council meeting, I found an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a flyer for a local award ceremony. You are one of 3 finalists for the Community Builder Award. Please join us on April 10th. I laughed, then cried, then called Valerie. You're coming with me, I said. You're the reason this place runs. You're the reason it exists, she replied. On April 10th, I wore a navy blue dress, my silver hair curled neatly. Jason offered to drive. Brittany rode in the back. Valerie met us there. The auditorium was packed. Dozens of nominees, their families, press, photographers. When my name was called, I walked slowly to the podium, cane tapping in rhythm. A hush fell over the crowd. My name is Irene, and I live in a building that used to be forgotten. Now it's a place people write about, move to, believe in. Not because of me alone, but because we chose to care. We chose to stay. We chose to listen. I didn't win. The award went to a young woman who built a literacy program for incarcerated mothers. She deserved it. Still, people lined up afterward to shake my hand. You remind me of my grandma, said a boy. You give me hope, said a woman in scrubs. I want to visit your building, said a man with a camera. I returned home that night to find the courtyard lit with candles. Tenants stood along the railings, clapping. On the mural wall, someone had added a new figure, gray-haired, in a dress, holding a key. A banner read, Our Hero. I stood in the middle of the courtyard, heart swelling. I'm just the landlord, I called out. You're the community. Cheers echoed through the night. May arrived again. 2 years since the diagnosis. I still had arthritis. Some days were hard. But I was not alone. Never again. One afternoon, I sat on a bench beneath the blooming cherry tree, a child sleeping beside me, a cat curled at my feet. I thought about Harold, how he would have hated all this noise and mess. I thought about the silence I once accepted, and how I'd found my voice. In July, I got a call from the mayor's office. We're launching a new pilot program, the woman said. Tenant-led housing initiatives. We want your help designing it. I smiled. I'd be honored. And I meant it, because I had learned something priceless. Power doesn't come from money or titles or threats. It comes from presence, from persistence, from refusing to be erased. 1 week later, we hosted a block party. Music, food trucks, dancing in the street. I watched as Jason spun a girl in pigtails, as Brittany taught an old woman how to salsa, as Valerie passed out lemonade, as Mrs. Navarro gave gardening tips to a teenager in a hoodie. I watched it all and whispered to myself, this is how the story ends. With joy, with justice, with community, and with me, in the middle of it all, finally home. August arrived with a brutal heat wave, and the building sweated through it together. Brittany organized an ice pop station in the lobby with a handwritten sign that said, Cool Down Zone. Jason fixed an old AC unit and installed it in the community room. Emily passed out water bottles with lemon slices. Valerie and I held a Beat the Heat movie night, playing old classics on a borrowed projector with fans aimed at every corner. The residents came together not just to stay cool, but to stay connected. One morning, I sat beside Mrs. Navarro in the shade of the cherry tree. You look happy, she said. I am. You know, I was afraid to move here. I thought it would be lonely. But you changed everything. I squeezed her hand. We all did. Later that week, a letter arrived addressed to me. It was from a woman named Naomi Flores. She had read about our building in the newspaper and wanted to visit. I've spent my life working with underserved youth, she wrote. I'd like to bring some of them by, to see what's possible. I replied with an enthusiastic yes. Naomi arrived the next Monday with 6 teenagers in tow. Bright-eyed, cautious, curious. We gave them a tour, introduced them to the residents, shared stories in the courtyard. They left with notebooks full of ideas and hugs from people they had just met. One of the boys, Malik, came back 2 weeks later with his mother. They were considering moving into one of our open units. I've never seen him so excited about anything, she said. He says this place feels alive. In early September, Valerie proposed a storytelling event. Let's call it Echoes, she said. Everyone shares one moment that changed them. We set up a makeshift stage in the courtyard, strung up fairy lights, and passed around flyers. On the night of the event, nearly every tenant showed up. Jason read a letter he'd written to his younger self. Brittany sang a song her mother used to hum while cleaning. Mrs. Delgado told a story about surviving a hurricane. I went last. I stood beneath the lights and looked at all the faces. Kind, weathered, curious, open. 2 years ago, I began, I was told I had arthritis. I thought it meant my life was over. But it was only just beginning. Because pain doesn't close us. It opens us, if we let it. Silence followed, then applause, then tears. A week later, I was invited to speak at a conference on senior housing. Just share your story, they said. So I did. I told them about Walter and Jason and the building that was almost lost but ended up finding everyone. I told them about murals and gardens and the power of listening. When I finished, a man from Seattle approached me. We want to replicate what you're doing, he said. Can you help? Yes, I replied, without hesitation. The ripple had begun. By October, news crews were visiting. One segment called us the little building that could. Another dubbed me the mother of modern housing. It was surreal. I watched myself on television and laughed. They should see me trying to get out of bed in the morning, I told Valerie. Still, I was proud. Not of the attention, but of the work. One day, as I was coming in from the garden, I found Emily sitting quietly on the front steps. You okay? I asked. She nodded slowly. Just thinking. About what? about how I never imagined this would be my life, that I'd end up somewhere like this, that it would feel like home. I sat beside her. Home isn't a place. It's a series of choices, and you made good ones. Halloween came with handmade costumes, candy stations in every hallway, and a haunted laundry room that scared even Jason. November brought food drives, gratitude jars, and Brittany's sweet potato pie that disappeared in under 10 minutes. On Thanksgiving, we pushed tables together in the courtyard, covered them with mismatched cloths and food from every culture in the building. We went around sharing what we were thankful for. When it was my turn, I simply said, all of you. In December, snow fell thick and fast. Children built snowmen in the courtyard. Residents donated blankets to a nearby shelter. And Valerie surprised me with a gift, a handmade scrapbook titled The Building That Irene Built. It was filled with photos, quotes, and memories. On the last page was a note. You didn't just save this place. You transformed it. And us. I cried. Of course I cried. On New Year's Eve, we gathered again. Fireworks exploded above the skyline. Jason kissed his new girlfriend. Brittany danced with a toddler on her hip. Valerie and I clinked glasses of sparkling cider. What do you want for next year? She asked. I thought about it. I said, more of the same. More connection, more courage, more stories. Amen, she said. At midnight, we all shouted, cheered, and sang. I looked around and saw not just tenants, but a chosen family. One I never expected to find, one I wouldn't trade for anything. In January, a letter arrived from the mayor's office. They wanted to recognize our building with a Community Resilience Award. You exemplify what's possible when people come together, the letter said. At the ceremony, I stood at the podium with Valerie, Jason, and Brittany beside me. The mayor handed us a plaque, and cameras flashed. What you've done here, he said, is nothing short of revolutionary. I smiled and said, we just listened, that's all. After the ceremony, a woman approached me. She introduced herself as a city planner. We're creating a new initiative, she said. We want to bring you on as an advisor. I was stunned. Are you sure? Absolutely. We need people who understand what real community looks like. I agreed. And just like that, I became a consultant. I traveled to neighborhoods in need, shared our story, and helped others find their own solutions. Every time I returned home, the building greeted me with open arms. In February, Naomi brought her youth group back for a weekend workshop. They painted a new mural on the west wall, filled with suns, hearts, and handprints. Malik, now a full-time resident, led the project. This is our stamp, he said, proof we were here. In March, we started a mentorship program, pairing older residents with local teens. Brittany taught one girl how to bake. Jason showed a boy how to fix a leaky faucet. Valerie helped a shy kid find their voice through poetry. I hosted journaling sessions in the garden. One teen wrote, "This place makes me feel seen." In April, Walter's birthday came around. We threw him a surprise party, complete with confetti and cupcakes. He was deeply moved. "I never thought I'd be part of something like this," he said. "Thank you." Later that night, he pulled me aside. "Irene, you've given this place a soul. Don't ever doubt that." In November, a grant we had applied for came through. It funded upgrades to the building, solar panels, new elevators, a proper computer lab. The ribbon-cutting ceremony felt like the beginning of yet another chapter. Valerie leaned over during the speeches and whispered, "Can you believe this?" "Every bit of it," I said. That summer, we hosted our first intergenerational festival. There were games, food trucks, storytelling tents, and music. People from across the city came. A reporter asked me, "How did you build this?" I replied, "One conversation at a time." In July, I received an unexpected message on social media. It was from my daughter. We hadn't spoken since the day I left. "I saw a news segment about you," the message read. "You look happy." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, then typed, "I am." A few days later, she called. We talked for an hour. She apologized for what happened. I did too. Healing began slowly. She asked if she and her children could visit. I said yes. They came the next weekend. She hugged me tight. The children explored the courtyard. I introduced them to everyone. They fit right in. That evening, we sat under the cherry tree. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said. "You turned pain into purpose." I squeezed her hand, tears in my eyes. So did you. As summer turned to fall again, I found myself reflecting more often. I thought about that first diagnosis, the fear, the betrayal, the loneliness. I thought about the building, once a place of despair, now a beacon. I thought about the people who made it so. Every hug, every fight, every laugh echoing through the halls. And I thought about legacy. Not the kind etched in granite or measured in money, but the kind grown in gardens, whispered through stories, painted on walls. One evening, as I watered the last tomato plant of the season, Emily joined me. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "But I don't regret leaving." "Why?" "Because this isn't just where I ended up, it's where I began again." She nodded. "You saved this place, you know." "No," I said. "We saved each other." In November, Valerie handed me a sealed envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a letter of recommendation. She was nominating me for a national award in civic leadership. "I can't accept this." "You have to. You've earned it." I didn't win, but I was a finalist, and I flew to Washington, D.C. for the ceremony. I wore a navy blue dress, the one Brittany helped me pick out. I spoke to a room full of strangers about hope, dignity, and the power of starting over. I ended with this: home is not built with walls. It's built with kindness. They gave me a standing ovation. I returned home to a banner in the lobby. "Welcome back, Irene." I laughed and cried and hugged every person there. That winter, as snow fell once more, we lit the tree in the courtyard and sang carols in every language we knew. I stood at the edge, watching, listening, my heart full. And this time when someone asked if I had any regrets, I said none at all. Because I had found something stronger than anger, deeper than sadness, more enduring than pain. I had found community, and with it, joy. Not the fleeting kind, but the kind that takes root, blossoms, and stays.